now these natural language models are getting very, very advanced.
Yes.
Right. And they're going to continue to get more and more advanced. And you mentioned something about using them for processing. I guess before we get there, how do they change the vulnerability landscape in cybersecurity?
This is a fantastic question. I think it pulls together a lot of things that we've talked about. So the anthropologist in me is going to say, right, language is the underpinning of culture, democracy, society. It is not overstating that, right? Like, we are primates who transmit culture and knowledge to the next generation through language, through written text, and that is rather unique to us, that we can sustain that level of transfer over generations. So when you get to a place where you can synthesize the language in what is largely plausible, right? Because I mean, an LLM is designed to predict with very good accuracy the next possible word in a permutation of words. You enter this age of synthetic reality, right? We have voice cloning software, we have text generation software, we very soon have more realistic video generation software. And in the words of a colleague and friend, David Mahdi, the risks become the volume, the velocity, and the variety of attacks. So, a Wall Street Journal reporter just cloned her voice and got past her own bank's voice verification, right? So basically we have all content verification out the window. We have a compounding of existing vulnerabilities. So I don't know if anyone remembers, but last year we had what were called thread hijacking or conversation hijacking email attacks, where someone sort of gets in and sits inside of a conversation and watches the back and forth and then jumps in as a participant in that conversation, right? So it's not like a single inbound phishing email. They look like a legitimate person within that conversation. Yeah. Look how easy that is if you are a foreign language adversary to mimic native English usage. You could jump in right away, right? You could also process the information in that conversation for intelligence gathering at massive scale. So I think it really changes the landscape, but I'm also hopeful that it changes for defenders too, because when you look at what Microsoft is doing with Copilot, when you look at what Google is trying to do with the cybersecurity workbench, ideally, the tool set is also moving in the direction of natural language commands. What if we could reduce the time to build queries, to run scripts, and you could simply ask your environment, can you reverse engineer this file? Can you, that could save us a lot of time on the defender end. So I think it brings great risks, but I'm hoping it brings a lot of utility as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, just like you described with the bank, she got past the controls. I could think of a whole bunch of controls you could get past if you were really good with natural language. And you could, I mean, everything that someone has set up, you could just walk right past it pretty much. And
I mean, very recently, there was this terrible story in the state of Washington about it's not a threat actor, it's just cyber criminal, calling parents and basically being able to mimic their children's voice in a panicked state using a voice cloner.
I did not hear about that.
Yeah, it's a voice cloner trained off of social media videos, which is the ultimate OSINT resource, right? You and I, we have no hope. We have recorded so much that.
My identity has been stolen. People have created accounts, and I'm sure they've used my voice and everything else because it's all out there.
Yeah, and to date, it's been maybe spoofed email addresses, maybe posing as you, and people have that fishy feeling oh, why did he misspell that, or why is he asking for Amazon gift cards, right? But now they could call up Emily, our producer, and say in your voice that you need something. And the human mind is evolutionary hardwired for collaboration, for trust.
Yep.
And that is the fabric at which we are talking about the vulnerability, not just systems, but the actual human trust. And I think that is where things get very tricky very quickly. And the processes inside of defenders systems not just like the technological processes, but how they talk to one another, how they verify is going to have to change pretty radically.
I am so glad you said that, because, we've often on this show proposed that cybersecurity is not necessarily a technology problem. It's a business problem. It's a people problem. And if we build the awareness properly, if people get involved, which the people are the biggest cybersecurity asset, then we could probably make a big dent in the number of successful compromises that take place out there.
Absolutely.
Right. That's it's interesting to think of where this is all going. I guess one thing would be, how does a machine generate context? Because that is such a human thing that I know you, George, you and I spoke, and I now have context. Like if I was going to reach out to you on LinkedIn, I know how I would have a way of reaching out to you. A machine may not have that same context. I don't think they've gotten there yet. I don't know what your experience is.
Yeah, I mean, so on the one hand, we have, I guess, contextless attacks, if you want to call it, right? I mean, you have like, North Korea has been like the OG fishers on LinkedIn, right? They find somebody who's been in a job for 3 years and offer them the next step up. And, they've been running that fake recruiting scam for a long time. And the context is your professional life, your self-worth, your financial compensation. But in terms of when we're looking at these new AI systems, AI is a process and sort of a means, not an end, right? It's a way to get to something. The thing that scares me more than a chat GPT, which is, again, it's sitting there and it's a tool and it can be used for good or for ill, but it has to wait for the input. The thing that scares me more is the auto GPTs, these agents that can run tasks, create their own task lists. So they can actually do that in an automated fashion. You could set up a series of auto GPT agents to, 1, run OSINT reconnaissance on this target, 2, scrape everything that they've said or they write so you can mimic their. I mean, you could send out essentially an army of robots to go and do these things for you to bring that context to the human operator, or they could also conceivably launch it in an automated fashion.
Now, on the other side of it, on the defender side, do you think threat intel is catching up and saying, we know the sources of these bots, or we know,
that is a good question. The way that bots have been created in the past vis-a-vis influence operations on social media is, I think, somewhat different than the way that these agents are being created. And I don't know if those technologies are watermarking or there's an indicator yet. And so that is what remains to be seen in terms of how they can be detected.
Yeah, I mean, we would have to, because, when this whole thing went down with Twitter and Elon Musk and the whole bot issue that they wouldn't declare, one thing might be is, why was it so hard to know how many bots are out there?
Yeah.
I mean, there should be some indication, even if you just look at the volume of posts. A real human may not post that much. Right. I would think there might be some metrics that would lead you to believe that this is pretty much a bot of some kind.
Yeah, I mean, posting at all hours or like an inhuman number of times in a certain, like you physically could not type messages fast enough. Yes, it seemed like there should have been indicators that were fairly easy. I can't speak to the back end Twitter architecture or why that may have been difficult, but we have seen troll and bot farms, right, where they've got these banks of iPhones or Android devices, and they're all plugged in and they're running scripts against those, and they're doing that. Now imagine that you don't actually need the hardware, right? That you can just run agents essentially through the internet that are doing that. That becomes a much more magnified problem.
That was a little understated, but yes, you are. You're absolutely correct. So, looking again at AI, just putting your future vision cap on, what do you think will become redundant? What job functions do you think are going to go away?
Yeah,
I mean, I have my list, but I'm
yes.
curious to hear yours.
I want to be very careful here because we've lived through a few hype cycles. I mean, I'm sure anyone listening will remember that the breathless hype around blockchain was like, in the future we won't have banks.
And we'll know the origin of every single component in every single product that we ever buy. That was also a big promise of blockchain.
Yeah. So I think there are a few things to consider. One, there is an assumption that all the AI systems will be incredibly accurate, right? They'll be so accurate that you won't need the humans. Oh, we've seen repeatedly that that's not the case, right? Like with skin cancer detection algorithms that were really accurate until we discovered what are they looking for? They're looking for the ruler in the photo. Like that's what they optimized for, and that's how they identified skin cancer. Okay, that was a problem. So are the models accurate? The other is that despite what would seem like space age leaps in technology, like I mentioned a 386, right? If we were talking in 1990 and I said, you will have this black square in your pocket that is a supercomputer attached to all human knowledge, you would have been like, we'll never work again. Everything will be so easy. But like actual economic productivity levels have been very level. So I'm very cautious about any promise that would just replace wholesale technologies. But I will say I'm more comfortable saying that job functions will change dramatically, right? So we currently, or we don't, but poor med students certainly pay a ton of money to become diagnostic computers, right? They go to lots of school, take in the information, provide the diagnosis. If we can take any of that off of their shoulders, and not just doctors, think of SOC analysts. If we can take any of like just log data analysis off, that we can then free those humans up to do more important work. In the case of doctors, maybe it's actually engaging with patients in care plans and things like that. In the case of security professionals, as you said, maybe it's taking that data and understanding how better to get through the business and manage the risk across different departments rather than just hours and hours of analysis and running scripts. I mean, that would be the game changer for us, I think. So I think it's the work functions that ideally become redundant and not necessarily the roles. I mean, we've seen repeatedly promises to like replace entire groups of people. And even in like the most automated thing, like car manufacturing, we still have robots in cages working alongside humans.
Sure. I mean, there's things there that a robot would find difficult to do or would be very expensive to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned a great example with medicine. In the field of radiology, this change has already started, right? You look at that's generally a group of physicians that doesn't interact with patients, not as much as somebody else. And they're in a back room looking at scans and telling you what this is. You could probably train a pretty accurate data model to recognize.
Yes, we should reckon with, as we said, inertia and culture, right? So currently, insurance companies get paid when the radiologist looks at it. They don't get paid if software looks at it, right? So how much does that have to change before the job function has to change?
Well, who says that one radiologist now doesn't look at 100,000 scans?
Right. Yeah. But that, I will say, medicine is very tricky because it calls into all sorts of questions about the training data and whether it's representative of, all different kinds of phenotypes, diagnoses, et cetera. And that is where trust becomes really big. I think that's really the frontier. I think trust means a lot to a lot of people, but I want to think, as we rush into employing and deploying AI, things like the NIST AI risk management framework will become extremely important because providers of those technologies will want to show that they have some kind of stamp of approval. We don't have any baselines or norms yet, but they will want to stand out. Like, we've put these things through its paces. We've audited it. Here's the report. Here's where it may be biased or whatever. And then the companies who take on those technologies, this is new territory. We don't really understand the transference of risk. If I take on like a new HR technology because I'm like IBM and I want to just get rid of all these back office operations,
right,
and those algorithms make choices that are risky to, you know, who owns that risk? I think that becomes a very important question.
Well, and you know, we're already there. So if you look at driverless vehicles, if they run over a cat, whose fault is it?
Right.
I don't have anything against cats, but I don't want to think about humans getting hurt here.
Yeah.
If a drone decides that it's going to shoot down or shoot at a building and it's the wrong target,
Yep.
a bunch of people die, whose fault is it?
Yes.
You know, we're already there with a lot of these things. And these questions are going to have to, they will get answered in due time. And I guess with everything else, I hate to say the term, but as humans, you know, acceptable losses has generally applied throughout history.
Yeah. When you think about like our first contact with machine learning, when you think about like the algorithms that were used to drive engagement, you know, there was no conniving mustache twirling person in the back room that was like, this will divide society. This will, you know, push extremism, you know, unintended consequences of objective driven machine learning. So I think that learning curve was very steep for us. The problem is that now these new technologies, one, if they're generative, it's sort of completely different than just processing data and optimizing for something. And then the other part is arms and legs. You know, it's APIs. It's connecting the processes into other things, right? It's one thing to have a drone. It's another thing if an autonomous decision-making algorithm can connect to that drone, right? It becomes about the connections between systems that is the most risky.
Yeah, and I think we'll get there. It's just that the genie is out of the bottle. It's just a matter of time. Hopefully, you know, these functions, as you mentioned, the role may not go away. There's an oversight function that is a real human in all these instances.
Yes.
Right? I know there's like, I'll take autonomous lawnmowers. You know, they're that's a big industry that's coming up, but it's fraught with issues. When you look at these self-mowing devices, if that thing hits a rock and it shoots out and it hits a kid, there's a liability. If you are mowing the highway and again you cause some kind of an obstruction or something gets onto that highway and a motorcyclist dies, unfortunately, I mean, there's some real ramifications to these things. So you would really hope that there's an overwatch function that is uncompromising. And we don't let AI just say, well, it's a pattern recognition engine and it's recognized this pattern, so it must be right.
Yeah. And I think those, again, to go back to the idea that jobs change, you know, when we were dealing with the fallout of deindustrialization, people were like, oh, we'll just have these programs that teach coal miners how to be coders. Well, I mean, now we actually don't need that many coders because apparently generative AI will do it for us. But there will be a need at some point for humans in the loop, whether it is overwatch functions that can transmit into an autonomous semi, you know, going down the highway when it detects things. If there are security functions that need to be built around the software for those systems, I think the jobs change. I don't know that they all vanish. I mean, certainly some will, because that just happens. But I don't think it's like this mass die off of work that we're looking at. But yeah, you bring up a lot
it won't be. It'll be everything. Look, to me, this is just cyclical. It's if you look at human history and you're a student of it, these changes have happened since time immemorial. Whether it was the invention of fire, it was the invention of the wheel, Or if we go back to the early 1900s, the Boilermakers unions were some of the largest unions. How many Boilermakers do we have today?
Yeah. And also, like, I mean, I like to point
Yeah.
out that in Victorian England, they also had these dreams of like steam powered robots that would replace workers. And
Oh
like,
yeah,
we're still
yeah. I
talking
remember
about
that.
it.
There's a couple. I forget. There's a couple science fiction books on that topic.
Yeah.
But
Very ripe for steampunk novels.
Yeah. That's been out there. So it'll be a gradual change. To me, this is going to be no different than any other. Maybe it's accelerated because technology is accelerating, but it's still going to be the same cyclical process, which brings us to trust. We've had to confront these issues with trust before. I don't think, do you think we can really 100% trust in something? That there's always that trust but verify kind of a.
Yeah, I would hope not. And I think that, it's one thing when you sort of live in your own age group, but I think we are seeing, we came of age before the internet and also before social media, but the digital natives who are growing up, I think you're seeing a lot of contention with things that we took for granted, like the data brokerages, the algorithms. Snapchat rolls out this, My AI app into theirs to make it stickier. They think that it's going to make their younger user base more engaged, and they just got this tidal wave of rejection. I don't want this in my feed. You didn't ask me if you could pin this at the top of my chats. I don't want this like robot. You didn't. I just thought that was really illuminating, that we took for granted that like, oh, people are going to want to talk with a robot and we'll impose these features on them. And we're getting a lot of pushback. We also see kids buying flip phones because they're just reckoning with the level of distraction that they have in their lives. They don't like how they feel. I think that we are of the generation that are more or less in power, and we've got to actually keep an eye on the ones coming up behind us because they have a different understanding of how to use the technology and what that trust entails. And I think we could stand to learn maybe from them and have them involved in the process as stakeholders.
That's a very illuminating response. I think that's interesting. I haven't had anyone that's posed it that way. That there's an opportunity to learn from them, and you're absolutely right, because my generation or our generation did not grow up in that era, and so we have a totally different context versus where these guys are coming from. That's how about that? So for all the millennial crowd listening in, there it is.
We got to involve Generation Z and the ones after them.
Absolutely. Now, I guess before we run out of time here, I wanted to touch on work from home. How much we've talked about culture, human interaction here quite a bit on this episode, but what do you think the ramifications there are?
For sure. So I worked in an office pre-pandemic, and then we all went home. And I remember July 2020, I still had the laptop balanced on books and whatever. And then I had the revelation. I was like, we're never going back. Like, why don't I just make this setup more comfortable? And I think work from home is like any technological or socio-technical change. It is what we make of it. So, commercial real estate brokers, they hate it. But but if you talk to, or you see on LinkedIn especially, the level of accessibility that work from home has allowed for employees who either identify as neurodivergent or they have disabilities, being able to customize their setup has been life-changing. I never thought that I'd be able to work from home. I miss the water cooler moments. I do get the Zoom fatigue. But I will also say I probably wouldn't have met as many people as I have all over the world. There are people in England that I sort of go back and forth with, sharing ideas. There's a group of people that I text regularly, and I never would have been able to connect with them had it not been online. And I do have the joy and the privilege of being able to go to conferences sometimes and meet these people in person. And I think that's been really additive to both my career, but also the conversations and the ideas that I can engage with.
Yeah, and I would imagine that some of these changes are going to be permanent. As you mentioned, people have gone back to the flip phones. I'm thinking that maybe this work from home is going to take us back a little bit to a more human interactive time, because we'll have more chances to spend time with our loved ones, spend time doing things that don't involve an electronic gadget.
Yeah. Or a commute, like a 3-hour commute.
Or a commute, yeah, a 3-hour commute, depending on what city you live in. So, and I think people have gotten a taste of that, a little bit of the good life. Maybe they don't want to go back to the way things were.
Yeah, it'll be hard. I mean, I remember when the big banks, like I want to say 2021, were saying like, oh yeah, we're going back to the office. And then you'd have these little rival banks say like, well, we'll pay you 10% more and you can work from home. I was like, I don't know how you win that argument, right?
You don't. And there's facilities is a huge cost in any business, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that Google and Microsoft, they're all going to have to, they've probably adjusted algorithms as well, because this has a huge change in the way you market to people, and what you display to them. So we're here at the hour. I wanted to give you a chance to plug anything you'd like. The floor is yours. You can.
Thank you for that. What do you
want to let the audience know about?
In terms of the vendor-customer divide, Danny Wolf of Audience First and I are doing a pretty exciting gap analysis. So we have issued surveys out to the buyer side. So everyone from like director of InfoSec up to CISO. What do you want out of events? What messaging resonates with you? What attracts you? And then we also analyzed all the booth messaging at RSA. And we are looking at the contrast between those two samples to try and get at the data that shows that divergence, in hopes that doing so will give people the data that they need to make the case that the approach has to change. Because again, as we say, if the marketers are going in one direction and the buyers are going in another, I mean, that doesn't leave anyone safer, and it doesn't leave anything on the table in terms of economic activity.
So when do you plan on, are you going to be publishing all these results? And is it a book form or blog? How is it going to be out there for people to access?
We are in talks with a couple of media organizations that are interested in it. But we are in the final throes of it and hope to have something soon. But people will be able to download it. They'll be able to, there's a whole appendix. You'll be able to see what the survey questions were. And, I don't think that it's perfect. This was a good learning the first time out, but we were trying to make it as systematic as possible.
That's fantastic. Well, shoot us a note when you're ready to launch, and we'll put a note out to all our listeners and a link. Let people know.
All right, sounds great.
Available. Yeah, I think that's a great project. If you can help shut down junk calls and junk emails. Hey, man, I'll take that. That's definitely worth lunch, not just a cup of coffee. So
there you go. All right.
All right. Hey, George, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to do this for us.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Thank you for having me.
Take care.